Now, friends, we must all get home. Barnaby, she will still need you to walk her home. It's getting late. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
Thank
I'll take this from you. I don't think you'll need it anymore.
No.
Wait a minute.
Here it is.
My leg? Did you?
Of course he did, Barnaby. Who else?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Barnaby. Now, get Shula to her home. You can do it faster than normal tonight, huh?
Hello, everybody. This is Cooper from Telepathic Bunny Comics, and here's Todd from Redshift Comics. And we're here. We're going to tackle the story today. The story. His
the
story.
biggest one we've done yet.
Yeah. So we're coming up on Easter. And you know, as most things when you mention Christ, I don't expect us to be very populated today. For people think they know everything there is to know, but you know, who knows? Might be some stuff in here you don't know. Anyway, hopefully we're doing this pretty much for rewatches, I think, but we'll find out. Maybe there's supposed to be 3 eyeballs over there, but they ain't saying nothing, so it could be just all right. Anyway.
Yeah, come on in and leave us some comments.
Yeah, leave us some comments. Let's talk about it. Anyway, as most of my shows this week have been completely, totally, you're the actual first guest I've had this week. Out of 3 shows, it's just not been a.
You gotta stop booking people at 2 a.m. That's the problem.
I'm not booking people at 2 a.m. I'm up at 2 a.m. What am I gonna do? You know. Anyway, it is what it is. But yeah, today we're gonna talk about his story, which is you know, pretty much the we're all in his story basically. So we'll just talk about it anyway. All righty. We're just gonna tell the story of the incarnation. Okay. Because if we go with the pre-incarnation, we might be here a while. Considering if you believe in the triune being, the Trinity, you're of the opinion that this particular individual we're talking about has always been it's part of the Godhead from the beginning of the world, beginning of time itself. So we're just going to start with the 33, and a half years that he spent with this stuff.
For a little while, he just kind of showed up in our reality.
Well, yeah, he kind of called his shot though. There's I don't know, about 300 prophecies, give or take, that and he fulfilled every one of them. Show off, complete show off. I mean, just a show off anyway. Here
have
we
you
are.
read Evidence That Demands a Verdict?
No, I haven't. I've read of that book. I haven't read it though. So that's the one where the guy was like talking about the probability of all the prophecies
Yeah.
being valid. It's about if you tiled the whole entire world with about
Yeah.
1 by 1 inch tiles, put a star
So
on one of them. Yeah. And just
talks
landed
about,
somebody randomly on the planet and had them
Right.
walk approximately 100 steps in either direction and just reach down and to find the first one. What is the right tile is about the percentage, of possibility that he wasn't fulfilling all the prophecies. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Josh McDowell is pretty much the same story as Lee Strobel.
Right.
And McDowell
And
did a
C.S.
lot
Lewis.
of apologetics type stuff, based on Strobel and based on other people.
Yeah. Individuals that set out to like destroy Christ and wound up bowing the knee, which happened a lot. I think. Oh gosh, what was his name? Really early on in Christianity, there was a person. Is this Saint Francis? I think it might be Saint Francis, but he was a vowed. He wasn't atheist, but he was at least agnostic, or he just set out to like prove it the impossible that God didn't exist, and wound up being one of his ardent supporters. Apostle Paul. That's Apostle Paul's story.
Right.
Apostle Paul, set out to destroy Christianity, wipe it off the face of the planet, wipe it before it spread. It was one of the greatest persecutors of the church. The reason for the dispersal of the church. He was one of the main reasons. And then he dispersed it in another way.
Right.
So when
so those stories are hard to, I mean, you can, come up with any evidence that you want, but when someone has an experience like that, it's hard to refute. You can't, refute someone's experience that they've had with Christ.
Well, we'll talk about our own personal experiences, there's nothing wrong with that. But, at least Strobel, I used him, one of his E's and the last one I did. And Lee Strobel, he basically, went to school for law, went to school for, I think it was journalism, something like that. And then I became a journalist at Chicago Tribune, won the Pulitzer Prize. So we're not talking about somebody who wasn't good at his craft. We're talking about somebody who's like at the top of his game. And his wife did something really crazy. She suddenly showed up with a profession of faith, and he was like, "Oh heck no, this ain't going to happen in my life. No, this ain't going to happen, man.
Not in my house.
Not in my house." And he says, "I'm going to disprove this Christ thing. I'll do it over a weekend. It won't take me long." And about a year and a half later, he sat down and he assessed all the information that he'd gathered and bent the knee. Because he's like, at this point, if I hadn't had bowed my head, he's at that point, I wouldn't have been the man that I always said I was. And so, he tells it better than I do, but it's called The Case for Christ. What was Josh McDowell's story? You remember that?
So Josh McDowell was a lawyer, and basically the same type of situation where he was setting out to prove that the evidence for Christ was, didn't stack up. And he went to, all this historical evidence, and anybody that you try to historically prove was an actual person, number one, and number two was who they said they were. The evidence is a little bit different than proving something scientifically true or not. So he went into like all of this evidence that Jesus was actually a person, and he existed And then, he said all these crazy things, and people said all these crazy things about him.
Mhm.
So if those things were true,
Right.
then what does that mean? And,
Yeah.
it adds up basically to, either he was a liar or a crazy person,
Mhm.
or he was Christ.
Yeah. And he got that from C.S. Lewis, who also
hmm
a Cambridge professor, one of the considered one of the towering intellects of his generation. Ran into a guy you might have heard of, J.R.R. Tolkien. You heard of this guy? Does it
Heard of
sound
it.
familiar? Maybe. Yeah.
Did he look like
Ring
a
a
hobbit?
bell? Yeah, that guy. Anyway, ran into J.R.R. Tolkien, and found this guy be extraordinarily intelligent, also very intellectual, but Christian to the core. Had gone through World War I, made his profession of faith, and he was solidly in that camp. And it just confused C.S. Lewis, who was just like just this Christianity is just like this, kind of this whole entire, I guess mythos. He considered it like, right on par with Brahms' fairy, the what do they call them, fairy tales, things like
Yeah.
that. And so he was like, and J.R.R. Tolkien's like, oh, I don't mind. Go ahead, disprove it. Go ahead. And C.R.S. Lewis like, well, it won't hold up to scrutiny. And J.R.R. Tolkien's like, go ahead,
Give it
feel
a
free.
shot.
Go ahead, take your shot. He says, disprove it. Prove me wrong. Just absolutely, just destroy me with your intellect. He's like, well, here we are at Cambridge University in Oxford, and there's like the oldest text in the world are here, and the libraries here are just like some of the best on the planet. He says, prove me wrong. Just go ahead. If you have no fear of it, then go and disprove it. And C.S. Lewis like, I will. I think I will. And so, and C.S. Lewis called himself the most most reluctant convert in all of England.
Come to kicking and screaming.
Like me, I tell my story. Kim B, what's up, man? If you want to come on, brother, here's a link. We have talking about the story today, man. Yeah, I know you know something of it. I think you have a degree or something or another. Anyway, but yeah. So click on that link and you'll go right in, dude. Anyway, but with me, I grew up in the church, and I believed in God. I mean, I didn't start from a place of atheism. I started from a place of basically agnostic. I believe there was a God, but he was this cruel puppet master up there, just did things on his own whims, and we all suffered, and I just didn't want nothing to do with him, right? Yeah, right there. Hey, man, right there. That Lord of Lords, King of Kings, that guy.
That's the one.
That's the one. That's the one. There's only one, but anyway. But yeah. So anyway, so one night, I decided that I was in my pain and my suffering. Here I was. I never left church. Now, never left the church. Okay, I sitting like right down the gun barrel every single Sunday. Pastor's here. I'm here. Okay, and but I was like miserable in my life. I mean, miserable to an extent that that it still boggles my mind today. I made it out of it. But yeah, I was denying him with living like I was a Christian, on the surface, but just denying him with every breath, And I took one night I took a walk. I'd reached the point where it was like, you know, this far no further. I think, you know, I was ready to, you know, and this is how screwed up I was. This is how screwed up I was. I thought that if I told God exactly what I thought of him and let him know exactly how much I hated his guts, that he was going to strike me dead. You know, and so because you know, you had all these. I guess in my head I had the concept of God as being Zeus or something like that. You know, and you just rail against the God and he'll strike you dead with a lightning bolt. I was wanting it to happen, man. I was like doing death, not death by cop, but death by God.
What's the guy in Forrest Gump?
Yeah,
He's strike me down or
strike me
whatever.
down. Yeah, Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Dan. No, by the way, that changed Gary Sinise. Doing that role changed Gary Sinise, and led him on the path to Christianity. But yeah, I had to, I was Lieutenant Dan. I was like railing against him, and it was raining. It was raining. And I mean, I just absolutely, I was headed to a house of someone who I'd kind of like try to use to fill that hole. You know, I was orphaned at an early age, and this individual showed me kindness, and I spent years trying to make him like into my father, you know, because I wouldn't acknowledge my heavenly father. So I basically stalked the guy, you know, in my misery, and I was heading to his house that night. You know, he was within walking distance of me, and I suddenly had one moment of clarity that if I kept going down that road, that I'd hound him the rest of his life and mine, and he would come to hate me, you know. And if I really cared about him like I thought I did, that I'd leave him alone, you know. And so that was like the moment where I turned away and started and realizing that the only option I had was God, you know. And so I spent the next half hour heading back, you know, broken man, kind of like telling him everything that he already knew about me. You know, and I came back to the house, and I didn't even make it to my bedroom. I hit I was on the floor in the dining room, staring up at the ceiling fan. It's the middle of the night. I'm soaked in wet from walking in the rain. And I just, my sinner's prayer was, Lord, save me or kill me. Save me or kill me. How far down do you have to be where that's your sinner's prayer? Save me or kill me. And this is coming from within the church, you know, and this is that's why I always preach to Christians as much as I do with anybody. Because I never left the church, dude. I never left the church. And I was that miserable, right? And it's and people like come after my faith and try to come after, you know, Jesus this, Jesus that, and they don't understand why I'm like, come on, yeah, bring it. They don't understand that I'm not talking about a intellectual construct here. I'm not talking about someone who lived all these years ago that may or may not have resurrected. I'm talking about somebody I know.
Yeah. Not only somebody that changed the world, but changed your world.
Changed me. I'm talking about somebody who I have a relationship with, you know. And it's like, yeah, you can't really explain that. And that they wonder why all these people died for him after he supposedly was killed off the earth, you know. And all these people who were cowardly, all these people who were scattered the four winds suddenly were standing up to Roman emperors and declaring that this person lives. And they never could understand how these people had the boldness that they did. This is a failed cult leader. Why in the world are these people, you know, declaring him in the middle of the Colosseum while the lions are tearing them apart? And well,
if you see somebody that you know died,
yeah,
in your living room,
right,
talking to you and saying, you know, touch my scars, that's going to change you a little bit.
yeah. And even Josephus said that that he died, and it was reported that he was resurrected, and he was seen by many.
Yeah.
That was Josephus, who was a secular, Jewish, historian. He even says that he was seen by many, people, eyewitness accounts. So there was many eyewitness accounts. There was creeds and stuff like that came within within the first year that he supposedly, after he supposedly died, there was these creeds that popped up. And so people were declaring that I've seen him. I saw him myself in my own eyes. And that they didn't have any explanation for that. I mean, because when you look back at his beginnings, okay, the guy wasn't born in his own house. He wasn't born even in a motel. He was born in a barn. Okay. He's born with the sheep and the goats and the whatever animals they kept in there. That's where he was born. And his first crib was not a crib. It was a feeding trough. And it wasn't one of these nice little wicker things with the little, with the nice little wooden appointments. No, a feeding trough is a feeding trough. Yeah. It's not glamorous, okay? They stuck him down on the hay in a feeding trough. That was his first cradle.
In the town of Bethlehem, where he wasn't even from.
Wasn't even from there. From there. I had to go back and pay taxes. You feel the pain. April 15th is coming. Anyway.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, remind you. Sorry, Todd. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But so that was the first place he was born, which is recorded in the scripture. That he wouldn't have a place to lay his head. He would he'd be born in humble circumstances. And interestingly enough, it says in the scripture, when the time appointed had come, that when the time had come for him to be brought forth into this world. And when you look at the timing, is very interesting. Caesar Augustus was the emperor, and he was the most stable of the emperors. He was the longest lasting, and he brought stability to the Roman Empire. It expanded its greatest extent while he was still emperor, and it was stabilized. There was infrastructure built. There was roads. The world had gone from wild, wild west to almost metropolitan. In other words, all the known world at one point was under almost the same umbrella for the first time in existence. And they had a lingua franca, a common language, Latin. They had like a common coin. And so, if anything, it was before, this didn't happen in the world before this time, and it was like a time period that was just perfect for a spreading of a new idea. Okay, and this is where he was born into. All right, and he was born to a king and a queen. No. He was born to a lowly carpenter, okay, a simple tradesman. Now, tradesmen weren't low at the bottom of the totem pole; that they were pretty close. And he had just married this young girl, and horror of horrors, this young girl had turned up pregnant.
Before they were married.
Before they were married. Oh, the chins did wag. Oh my. Drama, right. And to the extent that he was like, I'm going to divorce this chick. I can't marry somebody that's, sleeping around without. This is before that, that's before it's ever. Oh, yes, queen. Oh, yes. You get yours. You know, that's before that time. Okay. Full disclosure, my grandmother had a child out of wedlock with a married man. And of course, nothing happened to him. Nothing happened to him. This is the 50s. But she was like ostracized for the rest of her life. She had a reputation the rest of her life. I took my grandmother in her 70s back to that same community to for the funeral of her sister. Okay, that had just passed within days of my grandfather passing. So I mean, she was having a rough time of it, and my whole church hopped in a van and took her up there. Okay, so this is a woman that's respected enough for a whole church to drop what they were doing, hop in a van, and take her up there. That's how much she was respected. And she gets up there, and there were people like crossing the room to get away from her because, oh my God, the tramp is here.
Wow.
She's in her 70s. This is the things that happened back when she was an late teenager, early 20s. And this community, there's people in this community that still thought she was a tramp. Okay. Still would have had nothing to do with her because she had a child out of wedlock. Yeah.
That is why Jesus came.
Exactly. Exactly. But so this is his parents. Okay. A carpenter, a lowly carpenter in a backwater town. Okay. Nazareth was not a metropolitan area. As a matter of fact, there's a saying at that time, can anything good come out of Galilee? That and when people heard he was a Nazarene, they're like, a Nazarene. Oh yeah, Nazarene, I mean, it was a really bad reputation. And so that was he was a carpenter from a lowly town, and his wife was turned up pregnant before they were married. So, we're not talking about somebody who had parents that were respected. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she did say that, and he had gotten a vision from the angel Gabriel himself saying, do not divorce this woman. Okay.
Right.
What she's carrying is pretty darn important to the rest of the world. And
well, think about,
mm-hmm.
She shows up as pregnant.
Yeah.
And because she was betrothed to Joseph,
mm-hmm.
he had to go back to Judea, which
mm-hmm.
was where his family was from.
Right.
And be in the place that they were. They had to be, in the city that
mm-hmm.
their family was from.
Right.
So that Jesus could be born in Bethlehem,
mm-hmm.
like it was prophesied.
It was prophesied
in the book of Micah.
Yeah.
So all of this kind of came together
mm-hmm.
to specifically fulfill prophecy.
Specifically fulfill prophecy. And oh, by the way, he was in the lineage and line of David, and so was Mary.
Right.
They both had lineages through David, which was also prophecy. All right. Anyway, so he's born in this humble existence in this humble backwater town that wasn't even their hometown, and they were the thing that nobody points out usually is if this was his hometown, if he was in the lineage of David, his own relatives didn't put him up. I mean, that's how Mary's pregnancy was. They were like, we're not going to put up the tramp. We don't want the tramp in our house. And so that's why they wound up in a barn.
Yeah. Didn't even think about that. That's true.
Yeah. None of his family. I mean, he was from there. I mean, it's
mm-hmm.
the lineage of David. It was the town of David. They believe in hospitality of family, and yet nobody would take him in because Mary turned up pregnant. And they're like, you married her. What's wrong with you that you're marrying this tramp?
Hospitality, as long as you check all of our boxes.
As long as you check all our boxes. Ain't that the way it goes, right? But yeah, so but then after that, they stayed in Bethlehem a little while, and then and suddenly the king gets wind of these gentlemen coming through, who happened to be from the Magi from the Far East. A lot of people think that they came, that they were reading like a text from David, not from Daniel's prophecies, and they knew that this king was to be born at this time in this place, and they came to worship him. Okay. And so these three guys show up. They call them the three kings, but they're basically just really three high-ranking officers in the court, and they come through.
May have been more than three.
It might have been more than three. It probably had an entourage, And Herod gets wind of it, and Herod's like, "Oh, okay. Why are you in my kingdom? I need to talk to these guys." And they're like, "Well, because there's a king that was born. It's gonna be king of the Jews." And Herod's like, "Okay, what's my current position? I'm the king of the Jews." so he's like, "Hey, I'd like to worship this guy too. So, once you acquire where he's
I want to come with you, and I want to worship with you.
I want to worship with you, And so, so once you acquire,
we didn't see through that right away.
Oh, yeah, right. So it's like, and so it's funny. We did a Christmas pageant. My brother, who's autistic, had a problem with fidgeting, right? And he played Herod in that Christmas pageant. And I was a shepherd off to the side, right? I was just one of the guys in the bathrobes. Anyway, and I looked over there while he was talking to the guys that were supposed to be the three wise men, and his hands were just fidgeting behind his back, just like that. But he was like talking to him like calm as a cucumber. Calm as a cucumber, but his hands were like fidgeting behind his back, and I'm like, that was perfect, Herod. That was perfect. I always thought that was just the most perfect Herod. Hey guys, once you locate him, could you let me know? I'd like to come and worship him too, right? And so, yeah, the same angel shows up to them and says, "No, don't tell him." Okay. And so they get there. So this humble guy in a town that's not his own, with parents who are not respected by their own family, and he's got three magi showing up, and he's a toddler, and saying, "Hey, we got these gifts for king," and I forgot to mention this. Okay, the night that he was born, there's suddenly all these shepherds running around going like, "Hey, these angels appeared to us out in the fields, and they said that Jesus, the Messiah, is here. Our Messiah was born. We came and met him. We worshipped him." And people are like, "Man, what are those shepherds eating out there? Oh my God, what's wrong with these guys?"
Did y'all get into the mushrooms again?
I'm serious. They're seeing stuff. What? And which was interesting, because shepherds are like the lowest. They were like lower than the craftsmen. I mean, they were like the lowest of the low on the totem pole, which is what David being a shepherd and becoming a king was all about. And so when these guys ran into town and they're like, "Oh my God, we saw him. We saw the angel sent us here," and there's a whole heavenly host in the heavens, proclaiming it, right? And I believe it's in your comic, right? Anyway.
No, not that part.
Yeah, right. But yeah. So I mean, all this stuff is happening around this one solitary life. Okay, this supposed bastard. Okay, his own people believed he was a bastard. Okay, and which is like, I'll scrape my sandal off. You're not worth my time of day. And suddenly these magi show up and they hand them like a gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which are like things that you give to like a dignitary, the child of a dignitary or something, or like the new prince to be, right? And then they got warning. It's like, "Don't tell Herod." Okay, so they didn't tell Herod. And suddenly this angel shows up, probably the same angel, and says, "Get thee out of the Bethlehem and and head out." Okay. Get out of Judea, now. And so they sell off this new stuff that they got because they didn't have money, and and they took a trip to Egypt. And then suddenly, at the fulfilled prophecy, Herod found out that, oh, I've been double crossed. I'm not happy about this. All right, go to Bethlehem, kill every child under the age of 2. Every male child under the age of 2. And so they showed up and they slaughtered all the children under the age of 2. I mean, goodness gracious. All right, hold on a second. Because Mary was a real G. Right,
was a
right.
gangster.
She's a gangster. And Mary said, behold, the handmaiden of the Lord, be it unto thy word, and the angel departed from her. Yep. And so they escaped this slaughter. They escaped this. And oh, by the way, just in case you know, Herod did die horribly, eaten by worms. So if that makes you feel happier, okay. Yeah, one of the more horrible deaths that's recorded. So there you go. God did
I think
not.
we normally see the wise men bringing gifts to the baby in the manger,
right?
But we don't know for sure that he was a baby. He might have been.
He was at least a toddler. He was a toddler by the time, and that star was still appearing in the heavens over a year, leading them there. Okay, a star. Now this is interesting. The language is interesting. When they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found out that now the King James Version, it says the star. We have seen the star in the east. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, when they translated them, says we have seen the star from the east, which means the star was moving. Okay, for a year that star was in the heavens, and moving, guiding them. Okay, so this lonely little child, okay, born a bastard, to a lowly little handmaiden, basically dismissed handmaiden who everybody called a slut, and a father who's a carpenter, is a tradesman, didn't have money for hardly anything. They were poor. He was born in a barn, and yet he had people like running around Bethlehem saying, the angels have appeared to us, and then he's got these 3 wise men showing up. And oh, by the way, the local king wanted him gone so bad that he murdered all the children under 2. It says that the Rachel cannot be comforted, that Rachel is weeping over her dead children. This is like a prophecy. Rachel being I think Isaac's wife. Yeah. And this was like where Isaac settled. So it's like basically it was talking about this slaughter, and all this for one guy. Okay, all this for one kid. Okay, this insignificant kid, right?
And the Jews at the time were looking for the Messiah to come. Yeah, but they were looking for someone to come as a king. And he had to, come and bring Israel to this great place. But he came the way he did, and they're nope.
But he gave them indications. Okay, all this stuff was happening around this one birth. Okay, and then the next time we hear about him was he was 13. They had gone to the temple. Okay. No, actually, before this, they went to the temple because every child had to be consecrated before God, and since they were so poor, they only had turtle doves. They didn't have a lamb, so they wouldn't be consecrated before God. And they bring him into the temple. Okay, if this insignificant child, all right, this little bastard born to a disgraced handmaiden and her carpenter, cucked husband who everybody disrespected because he married her anyway. This destitute poor family, and suddenly they've got this lady who had been in the temple all this time. This lady whose husband had died when she was young, and stayed in the temple the whole time to serve. And she comes up and just starts declaring, this is the one I've been waiting for all this time. And then the priest came out, this blind priest, and he came over and he said, and gave him a blessing and says, I can die now. He's arrived. I can die now. Okay. All right. Okay. So this insignificant little kid, right? Disgraced and from woods, Nazareth, and this guy's saying, "I can die now. I've held the Messiah. I can die now." And this lady who's been in this temple her entire existence says, "I've seen the one. I've seen him. Blessed are you. Blessed this child. I've seen." All this time, I've been waiting for this to happen. And so, I mean, I don't give you, I mean, this child was not supposed to be anybody. And this was happening. Okay. And then, fast forward about 13 years. Okay. This little insignificant kid. All right. The next time we see him, it's back in the temple. But his parents lost him. He disappeared. Okay. They were visiting the temple, doing their thing, going to the Temple Mount like they were supposed to once a year, did a pilgrimage, burned all the incense and, had the sacrifices and stuff like that. And they were done. They're heading back. And everybody's like, where's Jesus? And so they're freaking out. And oh my God, we lost Jesus. Maybe by this time they'd forgotten that the angels had showed up and all this other stuff. And that he was fine. He was going to be fine. But they thought, oh my God, we lost our kid,
Trust me, I get that. I get it.
Yeah, right. Oh, you've done that. Yeah, everybody's done that.
I've done that a couple times.
Yeah. Father of the year, ladies and gentlemen. Father of the year.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, I mean, they're like freaking out. They're like, oh my God, we lost him, and they ran back. And they didn't have to worry because he was teaching in the temple at 13, teaching priests their own scripture at 13. Okay. To say he was precocious is pretty, yeah. And then when it got to him, he's like, why are you upset? Don't you know I got to be about my Father's business? It's 13-year-old telling him, why are you upset? I'm kind of like doing my thing here,
Right.
In other words, they weren't raising him. He was like biding his time. Okay. And it was a little.
Yeah, you need to stay with us, and you need to. Yeah. What are you doing? You're. And then he's like, "Hello, you're not really my parents. I'm not really learning what I need to from you."
No, I'm actually teaching them. I am the word, and I'm teaching them the word. So, and oh, by the way, these priests, he was legit. It wasn't some little kid that had the precocious kid that had read a lot of scripture and he was just like a savant. This was somebody who was teaching them things about their own scripture that they had spent decades devoted to. The Septuagint, not the Septuagint, but the Talmud. These guys had it. He just absolutely knew the Torah front and back, and this little 13-year-old kid was teaching them. Okay, and then it's like, okay, all right, I'll go with you. And so,
well, I wonder if he went up to the priest and said, "Oh yeah, I remember Moses."
Yeah, and by the way, you're wrong there. You're wrong. The priest is kind of like, oh yeah, okay, well, how am I wrong, child? And he's like, well, because this, and this. And the guy's like, I think I'm wrong. So okay. I mean, the Catholic Church kind of has all these things built up around him about this time, but our canon of scripture has this gap in there. Next time we see him, he's about 30 years old. And then the wedding in Cana happens. This time, sometime in the intervening time, Joseph has passed away. You don't know how much older he was than Mary, but living as a carpenter is a really tough life. And oh, by the way, didn't have good medical care back then. So whatever reason, Joseph didn't make it. And so all we know is he's taking care of his mother. He's the head of the household, right, at that time. And they're at a wedding in Cana, and they didn't plan very well, okay, because they were out of wine. You're at a wedding, and you're out of wine. So I think the wedding went longer than they anticipated, but or people drank harder than they thought. I don't know what the problem was, but they're out. And they're all freaking out. They're like, oh, my God, what are we going to do? We're out of wine. And Mary's like, here's it. And she's like, I think it's something my son could take care of, right? And so,
ooh, go get Jesus. Go get him.
Just ask my son, okay? And Jesus is like, woman, why are you pushing me here? My time's
So
not
the
yet.
question I have is, when he was at home with Mary,
yeah,
did he just do that? And she was like, oh yeah, well, I've seen him do that before.
Well, she knew that he could. Okay, so I mean, were there miracles before the miracles we have recorded? Evidently, there were, because she knew he could do this. And hold on, and so basically he said, okay, bring me some jars of water. And so they brought him some jars of water, and he blessed it. And then suddenly they're giving out wine, and somebody said, wait a second. You've been holding out on this. This stuff is good. So, okay. So point of order. Evidently, Jesus knew what good wine tasted like. So Jesus may have drank some wine upon occasion. All right.
And you know how long it takes for wine to ferment and to,
right.
So he, he just created it as if it had been through that whole process.
Right. It gone through the process of fermenting. And oh, by the way, these people, they knew their wine. This is wine country. Cana was wine country. Most of the wine came from Cana. So basically he was serving soul food to black church ladies. Okay. And they were crowing about it. All right. If Miss Ken B, if you're still over there, you know the significance of what I'm saying. If you can make a black church lady crow about your fried chicken, you've done something. Anyway, so but basically in Cana, they were like, oh God, this is great wine. And so it was time. It was time for Jesus to oh, by the way, there's just another individual we hadn't talked about. His first cousin, named John the Baptist, who had all these supernatural things happen to him. The fact is, he was born to a woman who was long past childbearing age, and she had and evidently her and her husband were still active. But anyway, okay, he wasn't immaculate conception. They were still having it anyway. But so this old lady has a child, and when Mary visited her, that child like leapt in her womb, and she was filled with the Holy Ghost. So that child had a fit being around Jesus, and he started gathering followers, and he was known as John the Baptist. And so when Jesus started to start his ministry, one of the first steps that he took was that he went to John the Baptist, his first cousin. And John the Baptist is like, there he is. This guy I've been telling you about. This guy I've been, preaching about. That's the guy. And it's time for me to, I have to decrease so he can increase. And so, this is before he got, one of the first martyrs. But what happened? Jesus showed up and says, "Okay, I need to be baptized. I need to be baptized. That's what I need. The first thing I need to do before I start this, I need to consecrate myself." And then John the Baptist is like, "You shouldn't be baptizing me,
Right.
And Jesus is like, just baptize me, all right? Come on, John, baptize me, man. I'm telling you. All right.
What you
So
do? You baptize people. Just
you
do it.
baptize, do it. Just baptize me, all right? And so, okay, when he's baptized, something really odd happens. Okay, now you're talking about the Trinity. Okay, so the Spirit of God descended upon him like a dove. Okay, so this is dove shows up from heaven and descends upon him. Okay, and then there's this voice from heaven that so you have the Spirit, right? You have him in the water, and then you have a voice from heaven that says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." And so that's the whole Trinity right there. And they're not all together into one individual. Sorry, Jehovah's Witnesses, but you're wrong. Okay. Anyway. All right. Anyway. So what happens from here? He starts gathering disciples, but the people that he gathers, oh my God, what a bunch of yahoos. Okay. I mean, he gathers a bunch of just scrubs. He doesn't go for the elite. He doesn't go for the best. He doesn't go for the top of the line. He goes for like the bench. Okay. He went to like AAA and got the bench setters off of AAA.
Yeah, I think about that when I'm, thinking about, doing something for God. And it's like, he didn't pick the best people in the world. He didn't pick the elite, the lawyers, the scribes.
No.
He picked the fishermen. He picked the people that he knew were going to screw up.
Yeah.
So he knows I'm going to screw up.
Yeah, he loves screw ups. He when he had his choice of going for somebody that had it all together or a screw up, he always picked the screw up every time. When he always sought out the people that other people despised. He always looked for the people that were disliked or dismissed. Okay. But before he started this ministry, he did this little thing about going into the wilderness, starving himself, and basically encountered the most powerful being outside the Godhead, and namely devil, otherwise known as Satan. And they had a nice little conversation. Okay. Here he is. He's had his weakest, his physical weakness. I mean, he's near death. Okay. You can't fast that long without being as near death as So here he is. He's at his weakness. He's as vulnerable as he's ever going to get. And Satan comes and does his best. Even uses scripture. He throws his best shots at him, right? And it's not even close. Jesus is just like bat, and so Satan goes away. He's tested, he's tried, he's done the baptism, he's ready. Okay. And so he goes out and gathers a bunch of yahoos to him. I mean, a bunch of, ne'er-do-wells, even the guy that's going to betray him. Okay. So, I mean, he knows this guy's going to betray him, and he still picks him anyway. Because he's like setting it up. Okay. Jesus was a 4D chess player. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He knew all this stuff was going to happen, and he set it into motion. And then so he gets a bunch of fishermen, gets a bunch of, he gets a zealot and a tax collector in the same group of guys. Okay. That's like cats and dogs. All right. So you got one guy that's like, murder the Romans, burn it all down, and up with the people. And then you got a guy that's like, I happen to work for the Romans. I represent everything that you hate and you're trying to tear down. And Jesus is like, those two would be perfect together. Jesus just did stuff like that, man. Got two guys. Right, he got two brothers who were just like brawlers. Okay, I mean they attacked people. They were rough. They were rough around the edges. They, ran their mouth off all the time. And he called them like the sons of thunder. James and John. Yeah. And then he
loved people that were dedicated to, what they were dedicated to. That
right.
well, except for Judas. but he had a
Except for
reason.
Judas, yeah. Judas was dedicated to the Lord. But I just played him in the Passion Play, and that's what I played him as a slime ball. I was sitting here watching the miracles, and I had like I had these coins in my hand. They were plastic, but they were like shiny. And I was just sitting here like fiddling with the coins. And they had a speech from the chief priest. It's like, I think I found a guy in his inner circle I think we can deal with, but it's going to cost money. And I'm sitting here like, okay, all right. But yeah, he also gets this big old rough and tough fisherman who named Peter and Simon Peter. No, it's Judas. I played Judas, and that's Magdalene. Magdalene. Somebody needs to reread their Bible. I'm just saying. All right. But anyway, so he gets this guy to be his left hand, right? This big rough and tough grumbling guy who's like, okay, deed, then thought. Deed, then thought, Somebody had always led with his chin, always like jumped into it, and then it's like, oh, okay, well maybe I should think my way out of this, and that's I don't read that heathen book, you know that, buddy. Okay, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you, Willie. All right, good to have you over there, dude. So here he is. He's like he gets this bunch of yahoos and this knothead to be kind of like be the leader of them. That knothead's brother Andrew, is a real sweet guy. He gets a guy named Bartholomew, who the first time he hears about Jesus, he's like, "Can anything good come from Galilee?" And Jesus is like, "I like you. I like you. You speak your mind. I like you." And then he's got this guy named Timothy, who Didymus, which is a twin. He was a twin brother. But evidently the other twin believed everything because this guy believed nobody, Thomas is his name, Thomas. And then, so he gets this guy just to believe anything. So everything he has to explain it twice for this guy, And so he surrounded himself with people that are just that were just like built to annoy him, but he just liked this motley, crazy, fact and stuff like that. Yes, he was a carpenter. Anyway, all right, so okay, this is gonna get go. I know where this is going. Anyway, it's all right. So these are the guys he gathers around him. He starts going through all Judea. He starts preaching. Okay. He starts gathering people with him. Now there's this pattern that starts showing up to where a bunch of people, they followed him. And he started like doing these miracles, the water and the wine was just the beginning of it. He started doing some incredible things, people that were blind, he was healing them. People who couldn't hear, he suddenly could hear, And then he would preach, and he would preach with this authority. Of course, he goes back to his hometown, and he reads in his synagogue in his hometown of Nazareth, and then he goes and sits down, and they're like, "Well, what's your conclusion? What's the homily?" And he's like, "Oh, it's already fulfilled. I'm here." And they're like, "Burn him, stone him, throw him off," They try to kill him, It's a prophet doesn't have honor in his own hometown. I can tell you that. Anyway,
yeah, because they saw him every day, and they're like, oh.
Right. He's a carpenter. What the heck is a carpenter doing? He was a carpenter. File 13. That is a fact. He was a carpenter. Anyway, so basically, during the course of his ministry, Mary shows up with his brothers, and they're like, "You're the head of the household. You're supposed to be back here doing your head of the household stuff." Even she forgot who he was at one point, and because she had all these people in her ear, like, "Where's Jesus at? Jesus supposed to be head of the household, Joseph is gone. You need somebody to like take care of you." And Jesus is like, Didn't I tell you before? I'm about my father's business. I don't have a lot of time here, And so, so he deals with that, societal pressure. He deals with his familial pressure, anyway. So, okay, it's nowhere in the Bible says he was a carpenter. It only says Jesus was the carpenter. Joseph was a carpenter. Prove me wrong. I did read that book, Matthew 13:45. Okay. All right. It's assumed that he was a carpenter because you became, in that day and age, if whatever your father did, you did. You took over. You were basically apprenticed under your father, and then you took over his job. Okay. And so it's just assumed, even though it's not spelled out, that he was a carpenter. He was gainfully employed because Mary showed up. When Mary showed up, her biggest complaint was that he was supposed to be at the home and he was supposed to be basically taking care of the finances, because she had all these kids to raise, right? And so he was gainfully employed doing something, and so it's just assumed that that was carpenter. Okay. It makes sense with everything else that happened. It makes sense that he was a carpenter. Anyway. All right. So even though it's not expressly said, it's pretty much assumed. And Catholic Church, they basically have a lot of apocryphal information that says he was a carpenter. The Bible itself doesn't say that, but it is assumed. Okay. All right. Taken care of. Moving on.
Yeah, that really has not much bearing on Jesus, ministry or his life, whether he,
Right. Right. Once he turned to ministry, that was what he did full time. Anyway, so basically, he lived. He did all these crazy things, man. Started throwing power around, like president, and there's magicians. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to church now. Hockey on. Okay. No problem, Val. No fault. I hope you do. I hope you do, brother. I hope you find it. Anyway, but so he started throwing around some power. I mean, some serious power. Okay, hadn't been seen since Moses. Okay, he starts doing things like walking on the water. Walking on the water. Let me repeat. Walking on the water. Okay, that happened twice. So not only did it once, he did it twice. Okay, all right.
Twice that we know of.
Twice that we know of.
Twice that are recorded.
Yeah, that's recorded. He might have took strolls on the water all the time. We don't know. But anyway, and on 2 different occasions, including one of the times he walked on the water, he calmed the seas. And okay, the storms on the Galilee are legendary. Okay, they come up fast and they are rough. I mean, seriously rough. They're more like tornadoes. Okay, so if you get caught in a sea on a storm on Galilee, then you are in deep trouble. And these are fishermen, and they knew what happens when they're in. They were like, okay, this is rougher than we can handle. And at one of the occasions, Jesus was taking a nap in the boat, and he was not waking up. And so they go back there. And they're like, hey, Jesus, wake up. Don't you care that we're going to perish here? What's wrong with you? And Jesus does this. Okay. This is in the language. Okay. He goes, shh. Winds and waves die. Just like that. That's in the language. That all he did was shh. Winds and waves. And then he's like, all right, can I take my nap now? Okay. So yeah. So we're talking about somebody that had so much control over the winds and waves that it's basically like, okay, all right, kid, shut up, go to your room. That's how much authority he had over the winds and waves. Okay. Yeah, all right, I'm done. You've had your time. Just shut up. Go to your room. All right, winds and waves. Go to the room. Anyway, so another occasion, he did something that was impossible physically impossible. All right, he took 3 loaves and 2 fishes, basically a box lunch from his kid. Okay, little pieces of bread and a couple sardines or whatever, and he fed 5,000 with it. That's 5,000 men. But it doesn't talk. It doesn't count the kids and doesn't count the women. There were more there than 5,000. Okay. And he just kept breaking it and breaking it and breaking it. And it's funny. The disciples came to him and they're like, "Oh my God! All these people are here. They're going to starve to death. We can't feed them. What are we going to do?" And Andrew shows up. He's like, "Okay, I found this kid with a box lunch. His mama is evidently the only person that thought ahead." But what's that? What's that? We'll feed the first 2 or 3 people and a couple little bites, and that's all we got. And Jesus is like, "Bring it here." And he blessed it, and he broke it, and not only did he feed 5,000, but how many baskets was it that they were after? 12 baskets afterwards. So each disciple had a basket they could take home. He gave them a doggy bag. Okay. That's the style of the person we're talking about here. He had a sense of humor. I'm telling you, Jesus had a sense of humor. Okay, but you also see that in the way he treated people. He liked talking to people that nobody else wanted to talk to. He liked talking to the woman who everybody else was like, "Oh, you're how many men have you been with?" All the women are like gossiped out. They're like, we're gonna go and draw our water this time. You don't need to be there, okay? Because we're gonna be talking about you, so you don't need to be there. So she went at a time of day when she knew that the little busybodies wouldn't be there talking about her. And then she shows up, and there's this guy sitting there at the well. He's Jewish, Galilean. And Jewish people turn their nose up at Samaritans anyway, and women especially, because women are like lower class citizens, right? And he told his disciples, "You go into town, you get some food." He took them 200 miles out of their way because he had an appointment. Okay, he tells them, "You guys go get some food. I got some food here. Don't worry about me. Just I got an appointment." And so this woman shows up. Her own people hate her. The Jewish hate her people, and her own people hate her. And so this is like the last person that a Jewish man should be talking to. And she's, oh, by the way, she's the slut of the town, and he's talking to her by himself, all alone at the well. And so tongues are going to wag, but he doesn't care. He does not care. Okay, and so she shows up, and he's like, and she's like, it's like, you drawing water there? And she's like, "Yeah, I'm drawing water." He's like, "What if I told you that I can give you water that you'll never thirst again?" And she's like, "Okay, I'm listening." But the conversation they had was more theologically deep and more complicated and had deeper concepts than the conversation he had with another guy named Nicodemus, who was from the Sanhedrin, especially the most learned people in all Christendom. Not Christendom, but the Jewish, the Jewish apparatus, synagogue. He was a brainiac among brainiacs. Okay, and Jesus was like telling him things like, "Oh, you need to crawl back. You need to be born again. Born again? What do you mean born again? Crawl back in my mother? What? So he knew this lady had a more theologically complicated mind and was a deeper thinker than Nicodemus. And so he had that conversation with her. But he also knew, if I change this girl and change her demeanor, change her way of viewing herself to where she starts looking people in the eye and loses this sense of shame that she's had her entire life, then I can change the whole entire the group of Samaria. I can change the Samaritans." Yep. And so he went to her. He went to the lowest of the low, the most disregarded and disgusting person in there, and he talked to her, converted her. She goes back into town, starts looking people in the eye, and starts like, "This guy told me everything that I've ever done." maybe even things you don't know about. This is the Christ. I think this is the Christ.
Mhm.
And they're like, wow, he still talked to you? Yeah, he still talked to me. And so they're like, okay, well, let's go meet this guy. And suddenly there's a revival going on in Samaria because he had chose the one person that couldn't be discounted, the one person that would get the most eyes. Okay, he was strategic, very strategic. Okay, and you see that, you see things like him passing by all these other people and healing this guy. That happened multiple times where there's a bunch of people waiting at the pool of Siloam, and he chose a guy who never got to the pool his entire life, had been doing this for years.
Right.
And he walks by all these people that are closer to the pool and heals that guy. And then tells him, don't tell anybody. Yeah, go show yourself to the priest and don't tell anybody.
Mhm.
And and he blabbed his mouth everywhere he went. He just ran his mouth everywhere. And
I
suddenly
think what's interesting is that Jesus saw these things and he didn't see things like everybody else saw things.
No.
He saw the flip side
Mhm.
of everything. Not like
Right.
he didn't see a glass of water. He saw wine already because
Yeah.
he knew that he could do whatever he wanted to.
Right.
He saw
Right.
he didn't see a storm. He saw that it was calm already.
Yeah.
And, he didn't see the woman with, a checkered past and,
Mm-mm.
men and boyfriends and,
Right.
husbands.
And
He
and
saw what her
it
impact
was
was
a
going to
live-in.
be.
Yeah, exactly. He saw the evangelist that she could be, right? Um, but he did things like, Matthew was the tax collector, he chose him. Also Simon the Zealot, he chose him. He chose all these people that nobody would choose. Okay, this is not the A tier people. Okay, if you were to make one of those, everybody does these countdowns, these A tier, B tier, C tier. These were the guys that would have wound up at the bottom of the rung. Okay. All right. They were not even the best of their own ballawhack. And that's who he chose. Okay.
Yeah. Like me.
Well, there you go. Like me, definitely like me. But yeah, he just loves it. He just loved the outcasts. He just loved the people that no one else regarded, nobody else respected, nobody else gave any kind of credence to. That's who he worked through. That's who he chose to work through. Okay. Now, so all this time, all these things that he was doing kept getting back to the temple. And those guys were not happy about it. Okay. Because he was changing the rules of the Sabbath. He was telling them, like, all these rules that they're telling you about are stupid. They're just like obscuring the worship of God. Get rid of them. You don't need them. And the guys are there like, excuse me? And they're like, oh, let's make some money off the temple. Okay, let's let these money changers in as long as we're getting a cut, right? And Jesus comes in there and he like throws them all out, drives them out with reeds and like, get out of here. This is his house of prayer. You guys have made it to a den of thieves. And the chief priest and and the scribes are like, wait a second now. Who do you think you are? And they're like, okay, well, let's trick him up. Okay. All right. Boom. Send a lawyer. Jesus bats him away. Okay. Take this woman we know that's caught and catch her in adultery, throw her at his feet, and then say, okay, this woman's found in adultery, red-handed. The guy she was with was not red-handed because he was probably one of the ones that was in that crowd there. And so Jesus is like, okay, all right. He sits down and kind of like starts drawing in the sand. And it's always assumed that what he wrote in the sand were their crimes. He started writing down their specific crimes. He probably named names. Okay. And while he was doing this, and they're like freaking out, he's like, "Okay, those that will the person without sin, throw the first stone. You know, stone her. You know, go ahead." And then they were sitting there like, okay, let's, before he gets to me, I need to go. I need to go. I don't want people knowing my stuff. And so she looks up, and there's nobody there but him. And he's like, well, it's like, where you, woman, where are your accusers? And she's like, I only see you. And he's like, well, I'm not your accuser. Go and sin no more. I'm not here to stone you. I'm here to forgive you. And there's people that thinks that was Mary Magdalene, or the woman that later wiped his feet with her tears and rubbed it with her hair. A lot of people think that's the same woman. Who knows? Because there's women all around Jerusalem that were discounted and disfavored and thought of poorly, and they all wound up following. And
he told her, your sins are forgiven. And in Jewish tradition, the only person who could forgive sins was God.
Yeah.
So everybody that was watching this
mm-hmm.
heard him say, your sins are forgiven. And they knew what he was saying. Well,
it's groundswell started. They started everybody started saying the Messiah. He's the Messiah. I'm pretty sure he's the Messiah, And meanwhile, he's still healing people. So he's heading to Jerusalem, and he decides to do a little side trip through Jericho. One of my favorite stories is he basically he's going through Jericho, and he stops at a tree, and he looks up, and there's this little man hanging up there who's a tax collector named Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus had run away from his guards and run away from everybody that was protecting him, and run up this tree because he wanted to see Jesus, and he was too short. And so here he is, and Jesus looks up there, and there he is, vulnerable. He doesn't have anybody protecting him or anything like that. And Jesus is like, hey, I've come to stay at your house today. And it's like, yeah, exactly. And this is somebody that tax collectors were despised because they were seen as traitors. And so he comes down, and he's like, oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, come to my house. Everybody's like, why in the world are you staying with that guy? He steals money. And Zacchaeus is like, if you can say that where I stole money, I will give you, but I will back 3 times what I stole. And nobody said anything. So he was obviously honest. But that's who Jesus wanted to stay at. And he didn't want to stay at one of his believers. He wanted to stay at this guy's house. And that's where he stayed. And then he headed into Jerusalem a little bit later. This is on the way to Jerusalem, right? What happens in Jerusalem? The triumphal entry. All these people come together. They throw their cloaks down. They throw shout, wave palm fronds, and shout Hosanna. And oh, by the way, to go into town, he told him, he's like, by the way, I need you to go and grab my donkey, grab the colt. What? Yeah, there's gonna be a colt in this field. Go get him.
Go to this person's house at this time, and tell him I need your donkey, right? And he's got it waiting for me.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so okay. Because I mean, we're talking about somebody who had the world wired. We have somebody that had it all figured out. Okay. We're talking about somebody who's maybe omniscient, omnipotent, kind of like God walking around with flesh on, But yeah, so he got led into town, and the rest is pretty much history. I covered it the other night. But he was betrayed by Judas, and went through the most horrific death that you can possibly conceive of. Hold on 1 second. Dude did not care about Zacchaeus' bad reputation. He'd seen Lazarus after he died. Right. But it was pre-set up. Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, he did raise people from the dead. That happened. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, occasionally, including his best friend Zacchaeus, who was dead for 3 days. 3 days.
Lazarus.
And, and everybody's like, okay, let's go and heal Zacchaeus. And they're like, he's dead. He's been dead for 3 days. He's probably stinking by now.
Lazarus.
And he's like, yeah, so. So he's like, okay, roll the stone away from the, bring out, Lazarus, come forth, get out of here, come on out. And so a guy who had been dead for 3 days gets up off of the beer and walks out, and he's still got grave clothes on, so he's like hopping because he's all tied up, and he's like, release it and let it go, okay, and so he did that. That happened. And so that really supercharged his reputation. People are like, oh, surely this is Messiah. He rose the guy from dead, There's this dude walking around that we know died. He died. I mean, imagine Zacchaeus walking into town and they're like, they were mourning him and they're like, whoa, who are you? You look exactly like Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus is like, dude, it's me. It's me. Like, you're dead. No, I'm not. Jesus raised me from the dead. It's like, oh, wait a second now. This ain't supposed to happen. If you die, we're supposed to they're probably sitting here toasting him in the local bar. It's like, oh, Zacchaeus, we knew him well. And then he's like, comes in, and he's like, I would have one.
Lazarus.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Jesus was God, or what could fit into a human. Yeah. Well, he was all human and all God. It was thinking, and the Jews believed the spirit would hang around 3 days. He waited 3 days. Yeah. Lazarus. Yep. And his it's funny because his sisters were like, why'd you wait 3 days? You could have saved him while he was alive. Martha's like, oh my God, you could have saved him while he's still alive. Now he's like in the tomb. He's thinking, and it's 3 days. He's gone. He's just gone. And Jesus is like, what's that?
Who was it again?
Lazarus, right. Anyway, so so that happened, and so people were starting to believe this is the Messiah, and the chief priests and scribes were like, okay, our gig is in danger here. We're like at the top of the Jewish pyramid here. We're in good with the Romans. We're considered the leaders. We got this, she says laughing, right? Right. And so she says, here we are, the top of the Jewish heap, we're rich, we're wealthy, off the backs of the people. And suddenly this guy comes in and he's like, there's this priesthood of the believer, you can go straight to God. You don't need the priest. And then people were like, she likes to laugh, evidently. Yeah. But so that their gig is like really been threatened. And so they use all their political power, all their political push, and they trump up a bunch of charges. Yeah, trump up a bunch of charges, right? And they, loosen their power structure. Right. Yeah, what she said. And they have them executed by the most brutal method that has ever been conceived by man. They still haven't topped it. To this day, they still haven't topped it. In fact, the Geneva Convention prevents people from being crucified. It's so horrific. And not only that, but they scourged him before they crucified him. They beat him to where he's barely looked human. And then they crucified him. Okay. And then he survives over 3 hours on the cross. And heals people and they can't. Yeah, it's a big threat, right? While he's on the cross, he conducts business. Okay, he's beaten beyond recognition. He's weak as a human being can get, as close to death as a human can get. And not only does he tell a guy, okay, today you'll be with me in paradise, I got you covered. But then he like, okay, well, let me take care of my mother. Let me say these sayings that are in the scripture, that are prophesied, make sure I fulfill that prophecy, right? And oh, by the way, let me take the sins of humanity on myself to the extent that God can't even look at me. So he blats out the sun in the middle of the day, makes it midnight in the middle of the day. And then when he dies, he voluntarily dies when he gives up the ghost. It says he gave up the ghost. He could have lived longer, but he was done. It is finished. Okay. That's how badass this guy was. Okay. Beaten beyond recognition, the most horrific death that anybody can imagine. And he's still conducting business and fulfilling prophecy all the way up to the time it's done.
Now,
And
when he
says
said
it's finished.
it is finished, that meant paid in full. So
Everything's
up until
paid in
that
full.
point, the Jews were required to go into the temple and sacrifice
Yeah.
every year. They had
year.
to sacrifice for the people's sins.
Yeah.
And there was
The
a
spotless,
requirement that
unblemished
God
lamb. Mhm.
put into law that
Right.
the sins of the people had to be paid by a blood sacrifice.
Right.
So
Right.
Jesus came
Mhm.
to pay that requirement
Yeah.
so that we didn't have to do that anymore.
Mhm. And so when he got there, hold on a second. Eastland, you should come on the panel. Priest arranged a scheme to make sure he cannot get faked, raised from the dead, assign guards to make disciples, cannot steal the body, and hoax people. Right. Interestingly enough, this is never talked about very often. But not only did the night become, or the midday become like midnight, it got so dark because God could not look upon his son, and all the sin that he took upon himself. But once he died, there was an earthquake because all that power that he had over the world, and this is a God dying on the planet. Okay. Earthquake felt everywhere. And during that earthquake, this heavy veil that was in the temple, this thing is cloth, but it's like this thick. Okay. This thing takes people can't enter the Holy of Holies without help. Okay. That's how thick this thing is. And somebody ripped it from top to bottom like it was a piece of toilet paper. Okay. And suddenly the Holy of Holies is exposed for the first time since the tabernacle was built. The Holy of Holies is wide open and indicating that there's no longer a barrier between God and man. It's been taken care of. And so now man can enter right into God's very throne room himself because we have an advocate there. Now,
So Jesus was the high priest, and
mm-hmm.
the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, bring the sacrifice for the people.
Yeah.
So Jesus, as the high priest, representing the people in their sin, brought all of the sins that he bore into the temple and sacrificed it.
Right. And cleaned the slate for all time for those who accept the gift upon themselves. Okay. But not to get too evangelistic here, but we're telling his story. That's a big part of the story, why he did everything he did. Okay. Now, he was taken down off the cross, and he was prepared, and they wanted him gone so bad that they were willing to let somebody take his body, wrap it, and get it in before the Passover began. And so he was rushed through all that process. They packed it with spices, wrapped him up and stuck him in the tomb of a guy by the name of Joseph of Arimathea. So Jesus didn't even own his own tomb. Okay. He never owned anything his entire life. He never had a place to call his home. He never had a roof over his head. And that seems to indicate that even when he lived with Mary, he was basically renting. So I mean, they didn't even own their own home. According to the scripture, he never had a place to lay his head while he was on the earth. And so here he is. He's not even his own tomb, but that's okay because he wasn't going to need it long. You know, he was borrowing it, right? Now, I got into the Shroud of Turin this week. And if you guys haven't looked at this stuff on the Shroud of Turin, look at it. Look at it. That smear job they did back in the 80s makes people think that it was fake, but that smear job, it's been completely disproven by now. It's been completely disproven, and to extent that most people don't even believe. Most people don't even take it as truth anymore. But they smeared it really good, and then they told everybody that, oh, we've disproven it, and that was carried worldwide, all the news outlets. But the fact it's been disproven since, nobody knows outside the academics. But the Shroud of Turin is still legitimate as far as they know. So check into that. But the man that they found in the Shroud of Turin, that's imprinted upon the Shroud of Turin, a photo negative that shouldn't exist. That guy, how did that happen? How did the image on the Shroud of Turin happen? Well, all they know is that the amount of power, light, and radiation that would cause an imprint to be made like a photo negative on a piece of linen is beyond any power that we can create today. Okay, so all right, so he's in the tomb, and they decide that they need to make sure that nobody has any misconceptions. Okay, so they go to Pilate, who is deeply impressed by Jesus, to the extent to where he did something that by Roman law meant that he was completely distancing himself from the verdict. Okay, the washing of the hands was a sacred ceremony. Roman law basically carried over from the Greeks, that he was saying, I disagree with this verdict entirely, but I render the verdict because I don't have any other recourse. But he was deeply impressed by Jesus. And so when they came to him and said, we need a seal for the door. We want to make sure nobody can come and take this. He's like, all right. You need a guard? You got a guard. You got a seal on the door. And so no disciples were going to beat up a Roman legion or any amount of Romans and crack that seal. That was their death if they did. The Romans would have come down on them like a tide of blood and murder. They would wipe them off the face of the planet. They would have hunted them down and they would have murdered all of them. But they didn't do that. Instead, the Romans shut their mouths and backed away from this thing. So all we know, all right, now all we know is something, 3 days later, in the early days, first light of dawn, somebody took this heavy stone, which took a bunch of Romans, pushing it into place, and tossed it away like it was a pebble. And inside that tomb was a shroud, an empty shroud that had an imprint of a human being on it. And then suddenly, this same human being, this guy we've been talking about, this carpenter from Galilee, is suddenly showing up and meeting with people and eating with people, encouraging them to touch him. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm here.
TikTok videos after he's dead.
Yeah, there you go. And so, yep, put into a rich man's tomb. Had been claimed by a relative, Joseph Arimathea was his relative. At least, yep. And suspected disciples may make a hoax by stealing the body. Roman guards, right. Well, all we know is that the seal was broken and Rome did not go after anybody for it. So what happened with the Romans that they went back on all this Roman law and decided not to pursue it? That if you know the Romans at that time, if they put a seal on something and it got broken by anybody but them, they would have rained down hell on anybody. They would have burned cities to the ground, and which they did routinely. That defied them. Okay, that's why the Roman Empire lasted so long. It's because they allowed nobody to defy them, and that was a defiance of the Roman law, and they didn't do anything about it. Why? Because they went back to Pilate and they said, "Okay, let me tell you what happened." And Pilate's like, "This is beyond us. This is out of our hands. You know, this is power that we can't conceive of." And he let it go. So Pontius Pilate was already, basically Pontius Pilate had met the emperors himself. And when you watch him talking to Jesus, he was deferring to Jesus. This Jewish carpenter, with the unlearned Jewish carpenter, beaten within an inch of his life. And Pontius Pilate, he's been told by this guy, "You only have authority over me that I give you." And Pontius Pilate believed it. Okay. This is a guy who met emperors. And this lowly Jewish carpenter was telling him, "You only have authority over me that I give you." And he believed it. Okay. And when it came back that tomb was empty, Pontius Pilate's like, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're going to drop this one." Yeah, we're going to drop this one. And the chief priests of Sadducees were like, "Aren't you going to pursue this?" And they're like, "No, not really." And so the chief priests and the scribes were like, "Oh, they stole the body. Everybody stole the body." And then the Romans didn't dispute it. You know, the Romans were like, "We can't do anything about this." Okay. Our
guards never said anything. I don't know what happened.
The Roman guards were like, Roman guards who weren't afraid of anything were terrified. So whatever this thing is that came and tossed that stone away from the door, I think they sent Michael himself. I think that was Archangel Michael himself. I mean, I don't think they even sent a lower functionary. I think that's something Michael would have handled himself. And Michael is somebody that shut the mouth of Lucifer. Okay, this is not anybody you wanted to mess with. This is the most powerful outside the Godhead. You know, I mean, he's an archangel. They call him the archangel. This is the baddest of the bad. Okay, and he came down and he just took. All right, let's get rid of this stone. And and those Roman soldiers were like, "Oh crap, play dead." This is the level of power that even the Roman soldiers weren't messing with. Okay. All right.
Michael's in my comic.
There you go. The seal was spit on, not broken. The Romans would. Yeah. And many believe it when they met Jesus. Yeah. And so all we know about Jesus after his supposed death, which we know happened. Nobody disputes that this death ever happened. Nobody disputes the death. Not even the atheists dispute the death. Okay. Well, some of them do, but they're idiots. The people who have actual knowledge, that, you know, they know it happened. Okay. But okay. His followers believed in him afterwards. Okay, they were hiding in upper rooms. They were like they were laying low the whole time, and suddenly they're in the mainstream Jerusalem preaching with power, speaking tongues that they shouldn't know, and they're saying that this was God. Okay, Over 500 people said, "Okay, I saw him. I talked to him." Over 500 people, and this is mentioned in the secular historians say that these people, there's eyewitnesses to this. There was creeds from that for, like weeks after Christ died. They were already doing creeds, and and sayings among themselves that he is risen indeed, started going around. And so all we know is that, if you just want to believe he was just a merman, if you want to just believe that, then go right ahead. But I believe we can. I'm convinced because I know the guy. I talked to him this morning. I talked to him a couple hours ago, freaking out about this. I was supposed to tell your story, and it's like, well, you know me. Go ahead, tell it. You know me. Isn't that crazy? Give me a second. But anyway, just had a moment. Got verklempt. Talks amongst yourselves. Anyway, all right. Okay. All right. Roman said you asked for guards. We gave you guards. Roman's like, so you really want to have this discussion? Yeah, the Jews were like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And they're like, this ain't our problem. We did everything you asked us to do. Anyway. All right. No contemporaries disputed the death and resurrection. No, they went to their grave. They had horrible things happen to them, and they went to the grave with his professing he was who he said he was all the way to the end. So you can dispute a lot of things, but you can't dispute that. People don't sacrifice for things. They don't sacrifice like these people did. They suffered deprivation. They had all the powers of hell trying to wipe out the early church, and they did a good job. They did a good job, including a guy by the name of Saul of Tarsus, who was really, really effective at it. He was the early boogeyman of the church. And then suddenly he shows up in Tarsus after with a letter from the Sanhedrin saying that he could arrest anybody that dared declare Jesus, but he's blind. He's being led around, and suddenly somebody gets a vision that says, "Go talk to him," and it's like, he's like, "Go talk to who? Who do you want me to talk to?" And so he goes and talks to him, and he wants to be baptized. And so he takes this blind man and baptizes him. Suddenly he can see again. And this guy who was like destroying the early church, he was running around destroying the early church and doing a real good job of it, the boogeyman of the early church. And he suddenly shows up in the temple declaring that Jesus was the Son of God. He was the Messiah. This guy overnight, like that, went from the biggest boogeyman. Yeah, those guys in the temple were like, "Is that Paul? Is that Saul? That's Saul of Tarsus. What the
Run
heck?
away! He's coming to kill us."
And he's like, Jesus is the Messiah, and they're like, "Oh, whoa, okay." And he's like, I saw him with my own eyes, and I said, "Who art thou, Lord?" And he's like, "I'm the one that you're persecuting. Cut it out." And so Paul, for the rest of his life, suffered like very few people have suffered, and believed all the way to the end of his days, till the sword fell on his neck. He was declaring that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. You can believe a lot of things, kids. You can believe a lot of things. You can believe a lot of things about him. But what you cannot dispute is that there's something to this. There is something to this. It changed the world. There's before him and there's after him. Yeah. There's a reason for that. Because there's the world as it was, and then there's this life, this one single solitary life, this Galilean that was, born in ill repute, bastard to a disgraced maiden, to a father who barely had a pot to piss in. And that individual went all the way to the most horrific death you can imagine. But now 500 people are willing to die for him, say that they saw him. So say they saw him. And you know what? You can deny a lot of things, but you can't deny that. That happens. Nobody can deny that. What these people are willing to do. I mean, for somebody who's supposedly this one single life that came and went. It's 33 and a half years as a young man. And yet he changed everything. Anyway. All right. Hold on a second. He claimed to be God, Jesus, Yeshua. Yes, he did. Love Saul's story. Yeah, there we go. I was going to kill he was going to kill the new Christian religion. Yep. And then Saul Paul missed the Messiah that was prophesied. Well educated in the Hebrew scriptures. Saul was Gamaliel. He was one of the biggest Jewish scholars of that day. And Saul was his prized pupil. So Saul was, as much as they want to say, he was nobody, Saul was the next big thing. He was a rock star. Okay. There's a reason why when he wanted authority, they gave it to him. He was a rock star in the Jewish Sanhedrin. Okay. And he also had dual citizenship. He was not only Jewish, but he was also Roman. He had dual citizenship, which came into play later on. So he was like, he was not somebody lightweight. Okay. This would be Saul's conversion would be like Marilyn Manson suddenly professing Christ.
Well, I think it might be a little different because Saul was, he was specifically, he was very, very zealous about what he was doing. Mm. He felt like Christians were disparaging God and disparaging the Holy Scripture. So he was getting rid of them because of his zealousness for the Scripture.
Right. He believed he was doing God a favor. He believed that he was getting rid of this heresy. And then he ran into somebody. And that somebody changed his mind entirely overnight. Somebody changed his mind overnight, just like that. And the injuries to Paul, that his eye was just instantly blinded. Somebody proved that later that would be what would have happened if somebody were to stare into a really horrendously bright light. So once again, Shroud of Turin. There you go. But he was knocked off his mule, man, and I tell you what. All right, you got any concluding things to say? Did we cover everything, Todd? Is there anything you want to point out?
Oh yeah, I just think we covered it. Out of all the people that we've covered, obviously Jesus tips the scale on every single chart that we have.
Right.
He was God incarnate, and he had, all power that anybody could ever have.
Yeah.
But he was also humble and, loved the lowliest of anybody. So,
yeah. Well, this is the reason I used that one clip. That just fit Jesus so well to me. I haven't watched Chosen, but I watched that one clip. Really, you put me onto it. I'm gonna have to watch it now. But
we want to watch that as a family. We haven't seen the show yet, so we're kind of holding off until we can watch it as a family.
Right. But basically, that one clip where Jesus is he heals one lady, and then her husband's he's stumbling off, and then all of a sudden it's wait a second. I can walk,
He turns around and he turns around. He's going Just waiting for the guy.
Yeah, and then he's like, "There it is." I love it. I love it. I love it because that's just something he would have done. It's just something he would have done. He was just like, and there's this moment where the guy's like, "Did you do this?" And he's kind of like, you know, but he had a sense of humor, man. He had a sense of humor. I mean, these doubting disciples, and he got 12 baskets full of food, and he's like, oh, there you go, guys, take it home with you. I mean, it's like, you doubted that I could do this, and now you got 12 baskets of food here sitting here. Take it home to your families, And he just did stuff like that, man. He's still doing it today. As a matter of fact, I can say he's got a sense of humor because he's got a sense of humor with me. I mean, things happen all the time, and it's just like, I know it was him. I knew it was him. But that kind of thing, where I didn't realize just what he's been up to, and then suddenly I see what he's been up to, and then and I'm like, you're good. You're good. You're really, really good.
Got me with that one.
You got me with that one. Yeah. Yeah. I knew when I got a car. There's this car that I got, and I really loved the car. And I knew from the time I had the car, I wouldn't have it for long. I just knew. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I always had that premonition that I wasn't going to have this car long. And then the morning came that I basically, I was driving my car to work, and suddenly there's a guy in my lane, and I was like, well, what in the world, but I saw this guy in my lane, and I was like, oh, today's the day. And it was just this thought I had. I was like, oh, today is the day that's what's going on. And because I had that clarity of mind, because I knew it was going to happen, I was able to turn the car at the last minute, and it saved my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You see where the collision happened, right?
Oh, yeah.
You see, it was a glancing blow. It was that bad of a blow, but it was glancing because I was able to turn the car because I knew that it was coming. Wow. And then I sat there, and I sat there, and I was like, oh, this is what you meant all those times you were telling me that my car, that I wouldn't have his car long. Oh, that's what's going on. And I was so calm about it that they were going to take me in the ambulance to the hospital. They thought I had a shock. But I was just so calm about it. I was like, oh, I knew this was going to happen. It's all right. It's fine. It's fine. And as a matter of fact, he kept telling me the whole time that I needed to get the special insurance for my the loan I took out on my car. And he kept telling me I needed to do it, and I didn't do it. And I went upside down on the loan. It was like the day it happened. It's like, I told you should have. I was like, I know. But that's kind of relationship I have with him. It's just like things like that just happen all the time. People, I have a relationship with him. He talks to me. We have conversations. And it's today I've been able to talk about a friend of mine. My best friend. The reason I'm still here. It's the reason I'm still living. It's the reason I'm thriving as much as I am, So anyway, we said helping this world, living as human and forever in heaven with God. Sense of humor, sense of badass. The humans are not getting it. How long am I going to be with you? You're not getting this. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he did that a few times. Oh, you generation of vipers. That's not an affectionate term, okay? Now you bunch of snakes. You guys are just a bunch of snakes, He told those beautifully attired, chief priests and Sadducees, what everybody was terrified of. He told him, "Oh, you're like a bunch of sepulchers with white with bones inside of it. You know, you're like tombs. You look good on the outside, but you're dead inside."
Yep.
I mean, imagine saying that to somebody that everybody else is terrified of, and just saying, "You know what? You look
Right.
good, but you're dead inside." And they're like, "Oh, no, I can't believe somebody talked to me that way." You know, I can't believe we gotta get rid of him. You know, we gotta get rid of him. And here he is. There's the Messiah. He's their Messiah.
And they were, yep.
the one that they've been pointing to, and he shows up, and they're like, we gotta get rid of him. You know, we're gonna lose our gig here. You know,
He just saw things differently. I want to know how he saw things. You know, what did the world look like to him?
Well, I don't think we could even conceive of it. I don't think our brains can handle that. You know, I mean, here he was at 13, and he was like teaching in the temple.
Right.
I mean, he spent his entire existence knowing who he was. I mean, it's just you know, but he still dealt with humanity. But he was such a human, and he dealt so well with people as a God. God walking on flesh, in the flesh, that his family it was clueless as the what are you doing? You're supposed to be home taking care of stuff. You're the head of the household. You're the oldest. What in the world are you doing out here with a bunch of these yahoos? You know, these smelly fishermen. What the heck are you doing? And Mary herself, you know, for all the ways she's venerated, Mary herself was like, you need to come home and take care of business here. You know, I need you home. And he's like, you're not my business. You know, I'm taking care of stuff that's bigger than your day to day. Okay, I'm taking care of something that's going to be bigger than anything you can conceive of, and so I can't be messed with this. You know, and that's how he lived his whole entire existence. I mean, we're talking about somebody in Gethsemane knew that this was coming, knew that he was going to be brutalized like few people have ever been like nobody has ever been brutalized in the face. This was Satan himself having free reign to do everything to God that he wanted to do except take his life. Right. And he went hog wild. I mean, he was all in this thing. And he took it out. He took all this, you know, thousands of years of anger out on this one human being, and he was brutalized. I mean, you read the stuff they're talking about, the Shroud of Turin, you know, some of the injuries to that body that they've discovered over the years. It is the other night I was moved to tears listening to it. I mean, they ruined him. They ruined him, and yet 500 people saw him walking around. Right. Yep. So they didn't finish the job. They couldn't finish the job. They finished the job as far as they could go, but he reversed it just like that. Right. I mean, as he's God, but he's also man. You know, what can I say? I mean, I know we're going 2 hours here and we're just going in circles, but you know, hey. Well, anyway, all right. Hold a second. Eastland's conversation over here. Respect the position of priests, do not live like them. Yeah. It says whores and taxpayers will enter the kingdom of God before you fake ass priest. Right, tax collectors. I mean, yeah.
Taxpayers.
Yeah. There you go. Taxpayers too. Yeah. There you go. Tax collectors. Nah. IRS agents are going to hell. I'm sorry. They're just going to hell. Sorry.
Nothing they can do about it.
Nothing they can do about it. Nothing they can do about it. Anyway. All right. That's a joke. That's a joke, guys. That's a joke. All right. Yeah, it's a joke, YouTube. It's a joke. Anyway. All right, guys. That's all we got for the day. Todd, you got anything else to add before we go?
I'm good.
All right, we're good.
Good discussion. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, we could keep going for hours, but we're just gonna.
I know.
2 hours. But anyway, we had fun. I had fun. Everybody that hasn't, for all the people that watch this later on, and hopefully you make it this far. I'm just going to say that if anything we've said has made you intrigued you in any way, shape, or form, that you want to know more, find yourself somebody who's knows this stuff, and ask them. If any of these questions, any believer, any true believer, should be able to answer these questions because they know the guy. Just say it. They know him. And you can too. It's available. It's available. Anyway, not to be evangelical, but you can't talk about him without being evangelical. You just can't. It's kind of built in. Anyway,
that's who he was, and that's
why he came. That's the whole entire purpose he came. That's a total. So, you got to talk about it anyway. So, all right. We are going to head out. Thank you very much, everybody. Y'all have a very good night. Thank you, Todd. Bye, buddy.
Yep. Good night.
Bye, everybody.